Hello everyone, you're with Business Insider again. This is Sriram Iyer, and today on our special series Budget Insider, we're going to discuss India's pain in the wrong place, unemployment. All the pun is intended, but it is really a painful period that a lot of Indians are facing right now. A lot of sectors have recovered. IT, EdTech, FinTech are booming. Corporate profits are better than they were even before COVID. But there are still 9 million unemployed people in India at the end of December. We here at Business Insider recognize that all the big talk on the economy and the GDP number and how high the Sensex is, all of this has no meaning for the average man or woman on the street. What they care about is having a job and making a decent living. And so we have with us a very special guest, an eminent economist, Mahesh Vyas, who looks at this data so minutely and looks at it every month, so much so that whatever he says is often the last word on this matter, at least. Thank you, Mahesh, for taking time out to talk to a young, anxious audience that sits on a platform like Business Insider. And on today's conversation, I want to start with some breaking news. Essentially, just a few minutes ago, I'm told that Kumar Mangalam Birla has put out a post on LinkedIn where he says that markets are too euphoric and the economists are too pessimistic, like yourself. How would you respond to that? Is that a fair assessment?
Well, it's quite a fair assessment. Economists are pessimistic. Economists are worrying about the economy a lot. A lot of very reputed economists who have looked at the economy much longer than I have, and even younger economists than me. It looks like a fairly large spectrum of economists are worried about the economy. We are always hopeful in this pessimism. So we keep looking for and sometimes finding green shoots, which are not exactly those that bear fruition in the long run. But currently, our search for the green shoots is really the most difficult one. One can say that since we have declined so much in this financial year, then the next financial year we will see an increase, which will be very good. But on a net basis, it's difficult for me to see that even in the next financial year, we will have entirely covered the lost ground. Even if we cover a very large proportion of the GDP next year, there is a lot that we have lost. And we should look beyond the GDP to see where the concerns that the economists are talking about.
So we've been speaking to a bunch of experts from various fields around our budget coverage. And indeed, some of them have struck that little positive tone. For example, Nilesh Shah came on our channel just a couple of days ago. He is also one of the part-time members of the Prime Minister's Economic Advisory Council, and he was trying to tell us how the GST collections are at a all-time high. The railway freight data looks better. There's so many positive data points that are there. And why not call it green shoot? Why be why are we looking at, let's say, one number like an unemployment? For me, it's a very important number. But having said that, it is an argument. There is so much to take heart from. Why are you not able
to? I don't think there is any disagreement that the recovery has been much better than expected. No one had expected the recovery to be so robust as it has turned out to be. As is indicated, as Mr. Nilesh Shah correctly points out, in GST collections, in e-way bills, in a whole lot of other indicators, like, for example, the railway freight traffic movement. Even other indicators are fairly good. Automobile sales, for example. And although the index of industrial production did decline in November, we believe if we adjust it for an excess number of holidays, festival holidays in November, that number isn't too bad. And I think in December and January, the number will come up. Electricity generation is quite good. So what does all this mean? It seems to suggest that, and what does all this mean? When you see this in conjunction with the unemployment number being high, or the number of people not having employment still being high, is that there is a recovery in the organized sectors. Certainly there is. And there is stress in the unorganized sectors. So there is a problem in the unorganized sectors, and because of the stress of the unorganized sectors, as the space occupied by them is being vacated by them because they are unable to run their businesses, the larger sector, the organized sector, is taking on that space. So this, adds up to something like the K-shaped recovery, that this recovery is going to create more inequality in the country. So both the stories are true. There is stress in the economy and there is a recovery. But it's not that these two are different stories. They are one story which can be combined to say that inequalities are rising. The unorganized sector is falling more rapidly and causing stress over there. And the organized sectors are doing much better and showing up in the GDP numbers, in the stock markets, and in sentiments.
And this is a stated goal of this government. The Narendra Modi government has made it very clear over the last few years that it wants the organized sector to grow and a bigger chunk of the unorganized sector to become more organized. And that is possibly what is, the result, the bigger picture that's emerging out of this crisis is a move towards a more organized industry. Having said that, I want to sort of, before we dwell a little deeper on whether it should have been done, whether not, whether the budget should continue or give stimulus to the unorganized sector. Before we get to that, I want to question you because there is one data point that's kind of stood out for me in your analysis and your article from a couple of weeks ago. The 4th of, not the 4th of Jan, the date doesn't matter. But according to your own analysis, 71% of all the jobs lost were in the salaried class since the pandemic broke out. Which goes against this narrative, because if organized sector is booming, then why are salaried people losing their jobs?
Salary jobs are not only in the organized sector. You
Okay.
can have a salary job in the unorganized sector as well. You could be losing jobs over there. There
Okay.
are people who have lost salary jobs and got it back. And what has happened is that, you see, all kinds of people lost their jobs. The unorganized sectors also lost their jobs. The daily wage laborer, the businessman, the agricultural laborer, everybody lost her job in April. And many of them came back. It is easier for an unorganized sector person to get her job back, because if you were employed, let us say, as a daily wage earner, you were, let us say, doing some carpentry work or doing some work of a mason at a construction site. Now that those things have shut down, you could, be hawking some bananas down the street. You could be doing some delivery boy work. You can shuffle. But a salaried person, particularly in the organized sector, if she loses her job, say an IT professional loses her job, it's not easy for her to get another job. So the recovery in the jobs was all in the unorganized sector, but at much lower salaries, at very, very, very low salaries compared to what they were earning earlier. Lower quality jobs. But the salaried people who lost their jobs, they couldn't get the jobs back, and therefore the outstanding loss of jobs is concentrated in the salaried classes.
And
That
that
is
was going
why.
to be my next question, actually. The one part of the unemployment problem which is not captured is the salary cuts that everyone has witnessed. In the media sector, it's a bloodbath, right? Pretty much everyone, people's salaries have gone back 5 years, 8 years. There is no limit to how far back they've gone, and the lifestyles are much different now. So is that getting captured in any way in the data that you look at, and how much? In that sense, is there some amount of leveling in the inequality in smaller sections, buckets?
No. I think this is only getting, if I cut the data a little more, like I did last week, I found that a lot of the job losses is in the manufacturing sector. Now, this is going to be largely or significantly salaried jobs. Across the board, whether it is food or textiles or chemicals or capital goods or whichever sector, even automobiles has lost jobs. So automobiles is doing very well, but automobiles is more than just car and two-wheel manufacture. There's a whole lot of things that happen in terms of people employed in the automobile industry. On a net basis, they are employing lesser, which means that industry, in the face of whatever the slowdown was for them, have cut salaries, have cut jobs, and have not cut production.
Yep.
So industry will always find ways of, and is better equipped to deal with the problem of the kind that we are facing right now, not labor.
Definitely. I mean that is an industrialist goal, to be more efficient, to be able to extract a lot more profit, a lot more result out of a fewer set of people at lower costs, and that is exactly what is playing out, as you said. Uh, so what is so we've laid out the ground, right? This is the reality that's there. Um, how do you think the government should respond to this, at least in the so far as the budget is concerned? And what are the options on the table for Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman to and to our audience who's watching this right now? The reason why we are discussing this is not to say that everything is bad and to take your spirits away. That's not the goal at all. I think the idea is to say that acknowledge the problem, only then we can fix it. So what do you think? Because more jobs is more earnings, is a better consumer, or better off consumer, and that itself is a stimulus that Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman could go for. Uh, is that how you see this playing out, or are there other plans that the government is hinting at?
Well, I don't think we can second guess the government.
Mm-hmm.
And this government in particular is extremely successful in keeping its cards very close to its chest. So you just cannot guess what the government will do tomorrow, leave alone the budget, which is a lot more organized in terms of keeping all the papers closed. But I think what's important is for us to lay some expectations. What should we be seeing? So there are many things, the first thing is to, I think the most important thing, okay, let's say the first thing is to get the arithmetic right. So how will the government raise finances and where will it spend that money? That's the basic arithmetic of any budget. And we know that the avenues over here are pretty small because the economy isn't growing enough and therefore you can't tax it enough. So if you don't have tax revenues that are going to be buoyant, then you're required to find alternate avenues of raising resources. And I think that's what is important in a period when you have this kind of economic stress. I think working towards ensuring that this investment works out actually correctly and works out aggressively is important. It is remarkable that the stock market has been very good, very kind towards a disinvestment program. You can get good valuations if the government works this out well. It's important to raise those resources and use it efficiently in these times. Relying on taxes is not going to be very successful because you can't rely upon the economy to continue to do well. But looking at disinvestment and similar other avenues of raising funds is very important.
It's funny, Mahesh. We've had a series of chats with very different people, very different points of views. A foreign investor, a think tank in Washington D.C., to a market participant here, to an economist like yourself, and this is one thing which there is absolute consensus upon. Don't increase taxes, don't increase custom duties, and in trying to do reduce imports and promote local manufacturing, because that's not going to help. And instead raise your resources from disinvestment, sell out the baggage that you're carrying, either in the form of stake in government banks or Air India, or stake in BPCL. All of those things, there's absolute consensus.
That's right. And I'm not seeing much progress on that. So more than half the year, nearly more than 3/4 of the year is past us, but we haven't made much progress on disinvestment. We should have been actually a lot more aggressive on disinvestment around this time, because at least for a better part of the year in the more recent months has been very conducive to doing a disinvestment program. So I think that is an important thing from raising resources. But even if we are not very successful in raising adequate resources, I think the government should be a lot more easier on its purse strings. It requires to spend a lot more. It requires to allow the deficit to rise not be afraid of the inflation impact of that. In the short run, we can take that hit just to revive the economy. If you don't do it, the arithmetic gets even worse. If you don't spend, if you have to spend more than what you get, the economy will go down even more, and the tax collections will get even lesser, and your spending capabilities will get even lesser. It's a spiral going down. It's best to boot it up now and then roll back after a year or two. That's what I think the government needs to do on arithmetic, but
So
I'm
we
not
have
guessing the
seen
government out.
the government has shown intent in spending. Now people are either happy or not happy, with the amount of money spent. People disagree on what is the amount of money spent. The government says a number. There are critics who question that, but there is definitely intent on spending. But a lot of people have criticized, saying that you are constantly trying to fix the factories and setting up plants, fixing the supply side, whereas demand has been a huge issue, and the demand a big factor in what people like to consume and can consume is in the employment,
Yeah.
in how small businesses are doing. So, do you think what this budget should go for? Should it go for more roads and bridges, more factories, and more sort of industrial investment, or put the money in the pockets of common men and women who are struggling to survive?
I think that's a very important point, and I think one needs to think of this correctly. I don't think this is an either-or question.
Okay.
It's not whether you should build roads or give money in the pockets of households.
Hmm.
I will say you're required to do both. It's not either or at all. So one needs to build more roads, bridges, dams, whatever you need to build in terms of infrastructure. India has a huge deficit on infrastructure. We are going to fix that. Money should not be a constraint in doing that. Number one. Number two, I don't think it makes much sense for the government to give SOPs to the corporate sector to do anything.
Okay.
We have given the corporate sector companies at large lots of benefits in the last 1 year or so. We have given direct tax cuts, which happened before the pandemic happened. So they have got that benefit, which was an incentive for them to invest. But 1 year has passed, and I see no improvement on the investment front. That cut, maybe it's not too early to say that, but that has been done. There's no need to give SOPs to the government, to the corporate sector anymore. It's not necessary to give more easy loans to them. We're only worse in the situation on the NPAs going down the line, because the corporates face a problem regarding demand.
But we have seen a significant shift when this government has started talking about production-linked incentives and not just cheap loans, right? I mean, that is a shift. That is an acknowledgement of what you're saying.
Yes, but it's still on the supply side.
Okay.
PLI is also saying that if you do produce, you'll get incentives for that. But I'm saying let's get out. Enough is done on the supply side. Enough, more than enough is done on the supply side. What we have is a problem on the demand side. Now, the demand side, it's important not to go the UBI way. It's important not to merely put money into the pockets of people, because India suffers from a very low labor force participation rate. People in general are not willing to work in general. Maybe because there are lesser jobs, maybe because of other problems. One doesn't know. But South Asia, India being the largest component of that, is famous for having very low women labor participation rate and very low participation rate in general. So what is important is to do more and more efficient MGNREGA kind of government programs. So that is the solution. Do it in urban India as well. And there are many economists who are saying this, that do an urban MGNREGA equivalent.
What would that look like, Mahesh? I mean, can you please, for those who are watching this and know nothing about what you're talking about, including myself, what would that look like according to you? Just in very simple terms.
Let us first look at what is MGNREGA itself. MGNREGA itself is Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Act, which says that the government assures every family in rural India 100 days of work in a year. It gives the work in the form of saying, okay, you're required to build a small road or a small public facility somewhere. It could be laying something for a canal or building a road, or could be any public work. Now, we know in rural India, there are lots of bad roads and there are lots of canals that don't work. There's a lot of waterway and sewerage not working. The need for fixing this is very high. So a lot of people can be employed in building that rural infrastructure.
Mhm.
Now, when you do this in urban India, you can't possibly do the same things. It's not possible to get those kind of people in urban India as well. But I don't think we have to just build that kind of infrastructure. Isn't it true that in urban India, we have got extremely poor public services? How many people are manning the streets for security reasons? So, whether it is police or it is any which way, I think the government is lacking in its presence to give us security on the streets. Are there enough public health centers? And if there is a public health center, are there enough people to help us out if you want to go there? Are there enough people manning the public schools? Are there enough people in government offices to serve you when you need to be served? The answer is systematically no everywhere. We say government has got too many people, but there are not enough people to serve us. So let's fix that. Let's have an urban employment guarantee scheme that ensures that the government is there to serve us on security, on the judiciary, on education, on primary health, and other infrastructure related manpower requirement as well. So
So
it's possible for the government to think of an urban guarantee act, employment guarantee act like we have in Manrega.
definitely. I mean, typically, Mahesh, on Business Insider, whenever we do these shows, so if you've people who have seen Business Insider in the past, pretty much every show of ours is laced with humor, jokes, sarcasm, and it's a very fairly light watch. It's not a very heavy. We don't think we are economists and we are going to decode everything, but we want the information to be passed in the lightest form possible. So but that this is an issue where I'm not been able to squeeze in a joke anywhere. And I know, because it just seems a little insensitive to do that. But having said that, you said something that about creating people who are manning the street. Can the government create let's say a para police force of people who are security guards, etc.? And that just reminds me of a lot of things that happened in UP, like the Romeo Squad and
No, no.
yeah, so I'm just giving you an opportunity to correct that.
Well, you see, I'll tell you another joke there.
Uh, uh,
In India, when you see a policeman, you get scared.
yeah.
When a policeman approaches you, you really get scared.
Uh,
Whereas the opposite is supposed to be true.
uh,
That when you see a policeman, you're required to feel a lot more secure. So uh, uh, I think what the UP government is doing in its own wisdom, but that's certainly not what I meant. What I meant is that I come from a labor economics perspective. One of the reasons why women don't go out to work, because work is not easily available in the close vicinity of their households, they're required to go pretty far.
yeah.
Returning back home in the evening after dark is a little iffy. Security is not really very good. And the fear could be well-founded, could be ill-founded, but there is fear. Even if there is one crime against a woman in a very far-off place, it impacts all women across the board.
Definitely.
So we require the government to bring in that assurance, employ more people, assure us that our women will be safe on the streets when they're going out to work and coming back. You don't have, like Madhya Pradesh has also said, that if women go out of their towns for something, register ourselves. No, I don't think that's wise. With due respect to the Madhya Pradesh government and its wisdom, I beg to differ, and I would say, please assure that when the women go out, you just ensure their safety across the state. Do not have to ask them where they're going.
They are under enough pressure themselves. They are fighting 1,000 different battles. Don't add to their burden, right? Reduce it.
That's right.
Great. So on that little light note, I want to come back to our serious topic, which is unemployment in India. And this is, and people who, again, on Business Insider, we're not picking it up just because there is a budget around the corner. We've been discussing this over the last 18 months or so. since this topic became something that India cares about. Um, and one of the things in one of those chats, I'm reminded, Gurcharan Das was with us, and he made an important suggestion. In fact, this was before the election last year, and he said that the government should not try to protect jobs; they should try to protect the worker. So don't tell companies how many people to hire at what price, etc. Instead, let them absorb what they can, protect those who are unemployed, give them basic sustenance, etc. How far are we from sort of achieving that dream? Is it possible?
No, I don't think I appreciate giving sustenance to those who are unemployed, because there are too many who are unemployed. This will again be tantamount to a selective UBI.
Okay.
It's supposed to be universal, but this is going to be selective. So if you are unemployed, you'll get some doles. We can do that, like the US does it, like most developed economies do it, if most of us are in the organized sector. Otherwise, what's going to happen is that this scheme will protect all those people who are in organized sector jobs, and you will never be able to protect that young woman who's in the middle of Madhya Pradesh or Orissa, and she went out to look for a job, didn't get anything, came back and was hungry that day. How do you identify her? There's no way you can. So, what is important is to create jobs.
Even in the Aadhaar era?
No, even the Aadhaar doesn't help. You will just not be able to be there. See, what's important, and there's one more problem, like I mentioned earlier. If you give that dole to her, you are disincentivizing her to go look for a job. So it is more important to create jobs than to give doles out.
How feasible is it in an era where technology, I mean, automation, self-driving cars, all those developed world problems aside, sheer data entry jobs, which a lot of women used to do in smaller cities and towns, not there. A lot of the even middle level, skill level jobs are now being taken away. How do you are you suggesting this as a stopgap, let's say, for now, let's tide over the crisis, whereas the government seems to be talking about creating a structure which kind of takes us into 10 years down the line where machines have taken over? I know the reality, the answer is somewhere in between, but I suspect you would be able to sort of articulate that better than I can.
The corporate sector is going to get more efficient, will work more aggressively towards becoming more efficient, is going to provide us less jobs. We're going to take this as a given. If they don't, we will become extremely non-competitive the world over. So there is no escape from that we have to let that happen. Intervening over there will be harakiri. So let's not go and do that. We require to say, where do we require people? And I'm saying that India is so underserved in so many ways that we require the government to step in to say, okay, we are not giving you enough nursing facilities. We have got a lot of people, a lot of hospitals. You will see there are not enough nursing facilities. You will see many, many places
where nurses are one of our biggest exports all over the world.
That's right. So we can export nurses, but we can also nurse ourselves. I think there is a lot of customer-facing services that we can provide. We have to be innovative in that. We are celebrating. See, Urban Clap, for example, has done a wonderful job. It employs lots of people, gives you service. It's a very labor-intensive kind of employment and cutting-edge kind of thing that is happening over there. You have more reliability. You have a person who can give you a face massage by a person coming home, can give you whatever kind of service you want. This was a service that was lacking. Okay, this is the corporate sector solving a problem and providing employment. We should be looking for many more such innovations than looking only at innovations in the fintech area. Sure, there will be fintech innovations, but it is these areas which are going to make the really great unicorns of tomorrow.
Fantastic
thought. The kind that actually solves people's problems. Fintech is more about gambling. Sorry, I'm being very dismissive about them. Great work that they do in many ways, but that's not what India wants. That's not what India is craving for. We have a fairly successful equity markets out there. We have good amount of financial reach as well. What we don't have is basic personal services, hygiene. So education. If we just take care of hygiene and education properly, the number of under-educated people, the number of undernourished people, and the two go hand in hand. A lot of the deaths of children can be saved if they're just told what is hydration. Just get your salts and waters very clear and clean, and you'll save lives. So I think there is a lot that can be done, and the government needs to take an active participation in that. What the government is doing is saying, let's create skills. Leave it to the private sector to do that. We don't require the government to do that. The government should be thinking in terms of services. So if the government says the people of India lack these services, deliver those services and see how you can do it. No skilling program of the government of India creating urban clap.
Mahesh, the argument there can be that the private sector is not going to take these skills to far-flung areas, right? It's not likely to happen. Nobody is going to open an edtech or a whatever, not even edtech. Let's say they will not set up a center in a far-flung, let's say, any place in Madhya Pradesh, like you said, right? Or Chhattisgarh.
I disagree. India never, ever, a century ago had tea. Okay. We had lassi, or we had chas, or we had something equivalent. Who made us drink tea? In every small village, ITC went out and sent Lal Cha Brook Bond. Okay? Private sector made us drink tea when we never had tea. So why were they doing it? I mean, right or wrong, we did not smoke cigarettes. We probably smoked some hookah, or we smoked some bidis. Why does everyone smoke cigarettes and drink tea? It's the private sector which has seen a market out there in poor India of the 1950s and 60s. The urban clubs will go to the last corner of this country, or somebody else will go, because the demand is very high. We require a gym everywhere. We require a health spa everywhere, and the demand is very high. That's all labor intensive. So skilling should be about service, labor intensive services, and not necessarily creating mechanics for a Maruti who's going to anyway use AI afterwards. Getting it wrong.
I think that was the best articulation that I was looking for of that problem. Let's come. We have completely running out of time. I want to squeeze in a couple of questions now. On the question of skill, labor-intensive sectors, I think construction is one sector that is yet to recover in a big way, or maybe there are sort of conflicting data points on that. Real estate is struggling, but commercial construction is still sort of picking up. So, there is a call for a stimulus on the construction side. Would you classify them as corporates and say, no, you've given them enough money, don't give them any more, do your public sector works? Or you say, it's okay, it's a labor intensive sector, we need to give people jobs, so let the budget give more money for construction?
Well, the real estate sector does not deserve any boost. They should be reducing prices of real estate. Housing prices did not come down as they should have come down in the meltdown. So they have got staying power, and they are staying. And when they will run out of money, they will ask money from the government and seek a bailout. I think that's a misallocation of resources. That's
which is going to happen anyway. Either they'll take the money from the banks, or they'll take it from the government. I don't know if there is a way out of this.
No, you don't have to do anything about them. Let housing be solved by government interventions. But I think giving a boost to the real estate sector is not what I would call for. I mean, why not any other sector? There are so many other sectors in trouble. So cherry picking real estate is not a great thing. If the industrial construction, if commercial complexes are growing, employment will happen over there. I think real estate prices need to come down. They have been too high. They are amongst the highest in the world in our big cities. I don't see how that makes sense for a country like India to have such high real estate prices. We have to be a little more realistic on real estate.
It's also the concentration of the industry, of the offices, and all economic activity.
Sure, but we shouldn't be fueling that process.
Yeah, you shouldn't be. Definitely not. People like me living in Bombay, definitely understand the pain of this real estate price, and which is, and to a great extent, I think there is a lot of argument made about how millennials don't want to buy homes, and which is a big contributor to this, or etc. I don't think that's entirely true. People would buy if it was affordable. Young people buy all sorts of weird things. A home is definitely something, especially if you in a place like Bombay where you have to move out every year, or every second year, and then pay the broker and look for a house. The sheer pain, people would buy homes if the price is right, just as any other product.
Well, if they don't buy, if the millennials don't buy, and these millennials could be only of the top 2% of percentile of the population, but if those millennials don't buy, then they are mobile. I mean, they're in Bangalore one day, they're in Chennai the next, they could be in Calcutta the next. So then there should be an industry which gives out rentals.
Gives out rentals, yeah, of course.
Yeah. So you have condominiums which will rent out an apartment for a year or two. This is what happens. Indians who go abroad, for example, where do they live? They live in these rented apartments.
Definitely.
So have an industry which has these, let it grow.
After a decade in Bombay, I feel like I'm one of them. So the last question, I think, and I want to tie up, because the time is short, I want to tie up 2 or 3 things into one. So you spoke about how this government should go ahead with disinvestment. Again, the biggest obstacle there will be the employees of these government companies, which they are likely to throw their arms up in protest. What would you say to them? And on the same note, in sort of fix this unemployment problem, what is the structure for the future? And I want to bring in an argument that I read from Raghuram Rajan, and he said that I think I was talking broadly about India, but I think he meant mostly about the government sector. There are 2 sets of employees. One set of employees who you can never fire, and the other set of employees who you can throw away at will. And how do we get that sweet spot in between? So one of the recommendations, for example, was that I think he wrote, give people a higher severance with every passing year, for example, right? And I'm trying to sort of boil this down into very snackable language that people can understand. So in the same breath, can you please talk to us about how do we deal with India's public sector employee problem when disinvestment is a need now? It's not a, oh my God, let's sell spectrum because we want to buy or do some mega government project. It is now a need. How do we convince the employees of these companies, and how do we? What does the future of government job look like? Government job, government-backed institutions like your companies, PSUs, etc.
So the first thing on how do you deal with government employees in PSUs that will be disinvested. I think the lesson to be learned from the farm agitation is very clear. We need to take all stakeholders into consideration and win their confidence. Without doing that, it will be a disaster. Let's be I'll be as mean as I can to solve this problem, that everything has a price. So what is that severance pay at which a PSU employee will say, I'm willing to walk out? Pay that price. It's a matter of negotiating. It's a matter of bringing them into confidence. It's a matter of, trying to talk them through this honestly and nicely, and not brazenly. So I think the lesson from the farm laws is very clear. If you bring those people into your confidence, you will not have the mess that you have. But if you have the same attitude, it will get very messy and very difficult and almost impossible. Selling the PSUs with the human resources is going to be a failure. So you can't do that. Maybe some places the human resources are really very valuable and people would like to retain them. But I don't think you can put that as a conditionality in hiving off a PSU. The second thing I will say is a very different but very important thing. Go back to the 91-92 reforms that happened. I think they are the best that we have done. We did lots of reforms and everything worked wonderfully because the economy was chugging. When somebody was shutting down a plant outside Bombay, in Mulund, for example, people who were laid off over there were easily finding alternate jobs. So the best solution is growth. If you have growth, you will be able to employ people. If you have growth, you can ask people from PSUs to please go because you've got excess foremen over here, but then somebody else is setting up a steel plant and they can absorb those foremen. So growth is critically important, and I'll give one last very important point in getting the growth back to order. It's not in the arithmetic of the budget. It's not about giving sops to industry or to anybody else. It's about sending a message out to create better sentiments. Those sentiments are extremely dampened today. So an industrialist is making a lot of profit, but is not investing. He's taking the money home. The sentiments are bad. The sentiments of the households is very bad. So get the sentiments upbeat. The government should look like a protector, should look like a partner, and not an intimidator. For example, saying that we will give you the vaccine, but will not give you a choice which one you're going to get, is bad optics, is very bad optics. Don't make it look like you are the godfather. Get people's confidence in. We will work wonderfully. The country will go back, accelerating back to 8-10%.
Something like what they did during the lockdown. The lockdown messaging was a lot more effective. Do you think?
It was harsh.
Yeah. Okay.
And with the benefit of hindsight now, I can say was a bit too harsh and unrealistic. I mean, there was an problem, there was a pandemic, there was a fear of an infection, but the lockdown was disproportionately harsh. And with hindsight, it looks like it was unfair. Today, people hardly wear masks, unfortunately. And they don't care about the vaccine because they think this whole thing about the lockdown was a semi-farce. Because the problem wasn't as severe as is seen in the Bihar elections, in the Singhu farmers, they don't get infected. So how will I get infected? So there is a problem in the messaging over here. I think the most important thing the budget should tell us is to instill confidence in people, is to instill confidence in the government as a protector, as a partner, and not as a godfather.
But in reality, are we bracing for a long period of low salaries, low wages economy?
We need not.
Huh?
We need not. We don't have to think that way. We need not think that this is going to be for the long run.
Okay.
If we solve our problem, we will see accelerated growth, accelerated salaries back again.
Fantastic. On that positive note, thank you so much, Mahesh Vyas, for being on Business Insider. I hope I've covered. Did I miss anything important? Is there something that you would have liked to?
You covered a lot.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And I hope to see you again around the budget after the speech is over. And just take a few minutes out, come tell our viewers whether your wish list was met. And if not 50%, 60%, 80%, whatever that number is, let's have a quick chat on the budget day as well. Please do take some time out.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye.